Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive, and we are diving into a pretty juicy one today.
Yeah, this is a big one.
This is a headline grabber for sure.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've got the New York Times, right?
The Times?
The OG of journalism going head-to-head with Perplexity.
David versus Goliath situation here.
Kind of. Perplexity, this AI startup, and not just any startup.
Right.
This one is backed by Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, he's got his fingers in everything these days, it seems.
He does, but it's not just like a tech world who's who kind of spat. This gets into some really big questions about,
The mental question.
yeah, like who owns the facts in the age of AI?
Yeah, how do we even put a price on information when algorithms are in the mix?
Right, and we've got the Times on one hand saying, look, we pour resources into investigations, in-depth reporting.
Shoe leather journalism, as they call it.
Exactly. And they're basically saying Perplexity is using their hard work, their content, without paying up.
And they've taken a strong stance on this.
Yeah, they slap them with a cease and desist, like, whoa.
Which, from a legal perspective, it's the Times saying, we believe this is a violation of copyright law.
Okay, so copyright, that's the key here.
Hmm.
But Perplexity is saying, hold on. We're not just like copying entire articles here.
Right.
They argue that they use web crawling.
Which essentially is like a digital detective. Right. It's out there, kind of like Google does. But in this case, it's this AI scanning information that's publicly available.
Right. It's how Google finds your search results.
Exactly.
But they're using it to create summaries.
Right.
Right. And then point people to the original source. So they were citing where they're getting these facts. But their main argument is you can't copyright facts.
Oh, and this is where it gets really interesting legally because there's a lot of debate about where simple information ends and a creator's unique expression begins. So, like, where's that dividing line?
Yeah, it's a blurry line.
Very blurry, and it's been blurry for a long time. But AI just throws,
Throws gasoline on it.
Exactly, yeah. Gasoline on the fire.
So let's say you're a student, you open up a history textbook, and it lists dates, major events, just the facts.
The who, what, where, when.
Is that textbook like infringing on the copyright of every historian who's ever written about that period?
That's the question, right? It's like it's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall.
Right.
It's really hard to define. And this idea of fair use comes into play.
Okay, so let's unpack fair use for a second. What does that even mean in this context?
So essentially, fair use allows limited use of copyrighted material without actually getting permission from the owner.
Yeah.
So think about it like this. You know how you might quote a passage from a book in, like, a book review?
Right.
That's generally considered fair use because you're using it for commentary, criticism,
Right, you're analyzing it.
But if you took chapters from that book, right? And you tried to pass them off as your own work, different story.
Totally different.
So that's kind of the line. It's blurry, but that's generally the idea.
So where does Perplexity's use of the Times' content fall on that spectrum? Are they doing like the book review, quoting a passage, or are they, full on copying chapters?
And that's what's being argued in the legal case, right?
Yeah.
Perplexity's argument is we're pulling out facts, we're summarizing facts. Facts are not copyrightable. The New York Times is saying, hold on, we disagree with that.
And just to be clear to our listeners, this isn't just Perplexity.
This is an industry-wide issue.
The Times is going after other AI companies too, right?
Yeah, and they've even gotten into it with OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT. It's a big deal.
So it sounds like the Times is really trying to, draw a line in the sand here. And I can see why this case is, making waves, right?
Big time. I mean, this has implications for the entire AI industry. I mean, we could be talking about setting a legal precedent.
So this is bigger than just, how news organizations operate online.
Oh, absolutely.
This could change the game for how information is used and shared, period.
I think it very well could, because it raises the question of how news is created, how it's protected in a world that is, being reshaped as we speak by AI.
Right, and the speed of it.
And think about it this way. If you have all of these AI models pulling their information from the same limited pool of sources, let's say major newspapers.
Right, because those are seen as, the reliable sources.
Right, exactly. Could that then create bias in the AI?
Oh, that's a really good point. I hadn't even considered that angle of it.
Yeah.
If all the information's coming from, I don't know, let's just say the New York Times, and that's, their main source of information.
Right, and every AI is just regurgitating.
Then it's are we getting a diversity of viewpoints?
And that gets to the heart of, what ideally journalism should be. It should be factual, unbiased reporting. And so you have this tension of journalism protecting its content,
Right.
but then AI needing access to this information in order to, do what it does.
It's like they need each other in a way.
It's this weird kind of catch-22.
Totally. But earlier you mentioned, like, there might be some glimmers of hope here, like some potential solutions. So are we talking like peace talks in the digital showdown?
I mean, stranger things have happened. Perplexity and some other AI companies have said that they would be open to working with publishers.
Okay, so what would that look like? Like, what would a collaboration even look like in this situation?
So there are a couple different ways it could go. One is licensing agreements, where these AI companies actually pay publishers for the right to use their content. So think of it kind of like a subscription, but for data.
Oh, interesting.
Another possibility is revenue sharing. So publishers could actually get a cut of the profits from the AI companies that are using their content.
Oh, so they're like in bed together almost.
Yeah, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right?
Interesting.
And then another key piece of this is the attribution systems.
Okay.
So like, imagine you're reading an AI summary, you click on a fact, it takes you directly to the original article from, say, the New York Times.
Right, so you can see like where it came from, the actual source.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense because then
Good.
it's like, I don't know, it feels more transparent to me as a reader.
Transparency.
And then the Times is getting more eyeballs on their stuff,
Yeah.
potentially, right? Makes you think twice about like all the stuff we see online.
Doesn't it though? Like,
Yeah.
we're just so used to consuming information.
Right, just like scrolling, scrolling, scrolling.
How often do we stop and go, where did this come from?
Right, like who actually did the work, did the research.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about that now for sure.
It's something to keep in mind. It's
Yeah,
like,
next time I'm like, hey, chatbot, tell me about...
exactly. Or if you're getting some quick summary.
I'm going to be like, is this a Perplexity situation?
Right, exactly. Like, is someone's hard work being used here?
Totally. It's kind of, I don't know, it just raises some ethical questions for me as someone who consumes a lot of information online, obviously.
And it really gets to this question of, like, what is the value of human-created content in a world that's just...
Being taken over by AI.
Yeah, increasingly driven by algorithms. And it's like, yes, AI can make things super accessible.
Right, and faster.
It can summarize, it can find things.
We all love that.
But, we can't completely discount the humans.
The humans.
The journalists, the researchers, the people out there, doing the digging, crafting these narratives.
That's where it starts, right?
That's the raw material, and making sure that those voices, those perspectives, don't get drowned out.
Right, because it could lead to this, like, very homogenized, like, single viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
If it's all coming from the same place, processed by AI, like, it's kind of scary, actually.
It does make you think.
So big picture here. I mean, is this legal battle? Is this, like, a sign of things to come?
It very well could be. I think what's interesting is it's forcing this conversation,
Which we need to have.
About how we're going to deal with these issues. Like, how do we value information? How do we attribute it properly?
How do we even, like, define original work?
In the age of AI, right? What does authorship even mean anymore? So it's messy, it's complicated.
Yeah. There are no easy answers, which is why we're here, I guess, trying to unpack it all.
Exactly. And I think, honestly, this clash of the titans, the New York Times, Perplexity, it might be the catalyst for some really interesting developments.
Okay.
We might see new forms of copyright, new ways of thinking about data access, maybe even new business models emerging.
So it's like out of this conflict, maybe some really innovative stuff will come out of it.
Yeah, because the genie's not going back in the bottle. AI is here to stay. It's only going to get more sophisticated.
So we got to figure it out.
We got to figure it out. And I think this case, as, messy and complicated as it is right now, it's the start of the conversation.
It's a starting point for sure.
It is.
Well, on that note, a huge thank you to our expert for, taking us through this really thorny issue. It's complicated.
It was my pleasure. It's a fascinating topic.
It is. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. And like we always say, keep those thinking caps on. This is just the beginning of a much bigger story, and we'll be here to dive into it with you every step of the way.